All right, we'll call the License Ordinance Committee to order. It is 5:31. We'll start with comments from citizens present. Is there anyone on this call on the Zoom who would like to comment on anything on the agenda? Anyone at all? I'm going to check one more time. Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to the next, which is the approval of the minutes from November 8th, 2022.
Oh, I will move approval.
I will second. Do we have any comments or questions? Given none, let's vote. Those in favor of approving, say aye. Aye. Moving on to licenses and permits. Please forgive me if I botch this name. Application, can we run 1 and 2 together, I think? Application for special event permit by Nestingen Paul and Hogan Reception. Again, I apologize if I'm pronouncing that wrong. Emily Nestingen Paul, contact person for a wedding reception on August 26th, 2023 at Lakeview Park. And item 2, application for an outdoor amplified sound permit by Emily Nestingen Paul for wedding reception, 2318 Tanager Trail, Madison, Wisconsin, for band, sound system, announcements, and karaoke from 1 p.m. to 9 p.m. August 26, 2023 for the Nestingen Paul Hogan reception.
I will move for approval unless there's any, I guess then we can hear details.
Yeah,
I don't have a whole lot to share. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. It's, just a wedding reception at Lakeview Park. It has been reviewed by Jeremy and Parks. They've already reserved the shelter, so everything looks good on my end.
great. Okay, I'll second the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And none opposed. So we'll move on to item number 3. Review of an application to amend the agent for the alcohol beverage license held by UW Provision Company Incorporated, doing business as UW Provisions, 2315 Pleasant View Road, to appoint Bree McDonald, Columbus, Wisconsin, as agent.
And a background check on this is fine, no issues seen, so I'd recommend approval.
All right. I will move approval.
I will second.
Any other questions or comments? If none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. Motion passes. On to ordinances. Number 1, Charter Ordinance 2022-01, an ordinance to authorize remote appearances for quorum purposes. Here we go.
So yeah, this was referred by council to us, so I don't know all of the details. I'm hoping the alders on might be able to provide some guidance on that.
Yeah, I was gonna, I mean, this has been before the council, before, at least for consideration, so I don't know how much background you need from me, or if you just have questions, or.
Can you walk us through, and I'm super frustrated right now because I had notes on a computer and the keyboard on my laptop just died, and then it ran an update. So I can't pull up my notes that I had. So we're just thumbs up. But I don't know why the keyboard, if anybody has any ideas on why a keyboard just all of a sudden stops working.
Because it hates you.
Honestly,
Is it battery operated?
It's
Is
trying
it
to ruin
remote?
your life.
I'm like Googling Dell keyboards reboot. I don't know. I think I might have hit a button when my was trying to speed something up. Anyway, can you walk us through the the whole aspect of it being this question is for Matt,
Yeah.
a amendment to a charter ordinance and how that makes it different than any other ordinance that we would work on.
Right, well, what this is, there's maybe some difference of opinion on how to interpret some verbiage in section 62.11 about whether you have to be physically present in order to be counted for a quorum. That's really what this gets around. And so charter ordinances allow us in certain circumstances to remove ourselves from state law on certain matters that we deem to be of local concern. And I think that's appropriate for this. So this ordinance doesn't really amend a charter ordinance. This is a charter ordinance itself is a declaration that we are sort of taking ourselves away from certain provisions of state law. And so this actually does two different things. I mean, it is a charter ordinance, but it's a charter ordinance that does also go in and amend certain portions of our code that also would sort of conflict with, or maybe not conflict, but maybe need a little bit more verbiage to help certain of our code provisions to be more consistent with allowing remote appearance. And so the charter ordinance itself really the true charter part of this declares that we're, removing ourselves from certain portions of 62.11. It defines what is considered as present, defines remote meeting technology, and then goes in and inserts those concepts within a couple provisions of our code that just helps to make those provisions make sense and consistent with the charter ordinance.
So what I'm hearing you say is that we need to flesh out and provide a little bit more explanation about what appearing remote means.
Well,
Is that one thing? And then,
right. That's one thing that this ordinance does is
Okay.
it sort of establishes what are we saying being present means. And really that's at its core really what this does.
okay,
It defines what being present is. And it defines the term present in, I think, more modern terms than probably what it meant when 6211 was enacted. And that's really what this does. Everything else just kind of flows from that concept of the statute really using this term present, and the term was created and used at a time where present arguably could have considered, because I think it was adopted when telephones were in use, but you didn't really have the technology. So the idea is that there's concern that present could be interpreted to mean physically present, and this is to essentially take on and say, no, we are saying present means this, and then it goes on to define the real operative here, that to allow us to do remotely. So we also have our own definition of what does remote meeting technology mean, such that you're going to be able to appear that way. And it's clarified to, I think the key part here is that it's whatever the technology is, but it's got to allow the member to be able to participate with the other members, engage with them, in substantially simultaneous communication, and also to, have the other attendees in the meeting be able to do that with you. So you're in those aspects approximating physical attendance. And so it does so we're not just willy-nilly just allowing people to call in on a cell phone, but only one person can really hear the person on the other line, and those kind of things. It raises the bar somewhat, such that or sets a standard for participation, so that in most cases you're actually able to participate in all the ways that are important. Or at least that's what we're trying to do. with that definition in number 3. of
Right,
the-
and so I recognize that Larry wrote this, so,
Actually, I wrote it.
oh, you did? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, then I guess my question to you would be, so do you feel that it's sufficient, it does that sufficiently in the way that it's currently written, or do we need to provide more?
I know, I think so. I mean, yeah, I
And-
mean, it's fairly simple, but I think the task it is meant to accomplish is not super complicated. Yeah, I mean, I wrote this, I think back in the spring, and so even as I'm reading it with about as fresh an eye as one
Right.
can have, being the author of something, and
And when you wrote it, did you base any of it on other municipalities that had done a similar ordinance, or was this something that you?
I think I had looked at ways of defining remote. I don't remember how much I borrowed from others. I suspect I borrowed a bit.
Do you remember from where?
No.
Okay.
You know, a lot of places, a lot of communities have approached this differently, and I think there's a lot of differences of opinion on whether you actually need a charter ordinance. As I sit here, I'm not sure if anyone else has done a charter ordinance to do this. I looked at some that just have policies, some that just did an ordinary ordinance. I think just about every place I looked into has tried to address remote meeting in some sort of formal fashion, but I did not find, you know, any one way of doing it.
So what is the benefit of doing it as a charter ordinance versus like,
Well, the benefit is it is sort of a belt and suspenders approach, because, you know, the other ways, if you've just done it by a policy or just an ordinary ordinance, if somebody wants to, you know, try
Challenge
to
it.
challenge something that you've done, they could say that, no, sorry, 6211 says that at present, and it means this. You know, of course, you know, charter ordinances aren't always the end all and be all either. There are some limitations, and maybe there are still those arguments, but it makes it takes it up to another level of I guess security to have done it this way, and I think it just solidifies the legality of what we're doing further than we would under some other format.
Matt, what I really like about how you wrote this is that it really does give us a lot of flexibility in how we use it. And that we can have a quorum, even if everyone is, you know,
Right.
appearing remotely. Because I know there was discussion in the last council meeting saying like, well, in the council, we should all be forced to have a physical quorum, but in the committees, maybe we don't have to. And I just think that it just gets a little convoluted, and this kind of overall definition, I think, will really help.
Well, certainly one, it doesn't say we have to do, I mean, have to do remote meetings, first of all, and second of all, it gives us some flexibility. I mean, I hopefully have left enough flexibility in there as the technology changes, that
Yeah,
we're not bound to any specific technologies. It's more focused on what are the characteristics of the technology and how it allows you to interact. And yeah, like I said, I mean, I think the real concern for this is more because of for the council, because 6211 in the language that we're looking at applies specifically to the council. But I think this would still be a guide for the criteria. I mean, once we have the technology that would be available to the council for doing the same thing, I think, you know, it'd be equal with
yeah.
other committees, but
well, can you explain the difference between, how the, not the difference, because when I read this, this applies to the council. I don't see this applying to the committees at all, right?
Right. Well, I
So,
don't think, yeah, I don't think any
and from what I
of
saw,
this stuff that we've got in our ordinance applies to the committees. I mean, really for our committees, the only thing that really we're constrained by is the open meetings law.
right,
Um,
And
so-
quorum, though, we are constrained by quorum.
Well, yeah, right.
right, but that's
And-
not in the, I don't think that's,
Right, yeah,
By ord-
the element of presence and what that means though is not in any statute. So we aren't as arguably constrained. Like I said, I don't want to say that it's at all clear that we need to go this far in doing the charter ordinance. It's just it provides us more security that we're doing this right rather than
Yeah.
that I feel that it's necessary. But, you know, this is what, when we first started talking about when we repeal the emergency resolution that we've been under, this is when I drafted this and, you know, so we could continue with remote meetings or use that technology as we
Yeah.
move forward if the council so wished.
Yeah, I found it interesting that, there were some people arguing to end it altogether, but the mayor was out because he was quarantined and Luke was out because he was out of town on business. And it was like, we need this definition so that this can happen. So this looks great to me. Are we voting on this one tonight? To take it back to council? Is that what we're doing?
I don't know, I can't, does that matter how it's listed on the agenda for our committee on how it's voted for? Because I thought it's not a discussion item, right?
Nope,
It's-
it's under ordinances.
Okay. Explain to me how in the process has worked, because this is the
Yeah.
first one I've seen.
Yeah, I mean, usually so if they refer an ordinance, usually if Alano discusses it, and I mean, if you have any language concerns or policy concerns, you would typically either ask me to go back to the drawing board to address certain concerns, or if you like it, you recommend approval to the council.
Can you, in section 6, when it talks about the referendum petition require, if somebody requires? or
Yeah,
requests it?
that's basically recites what the statutory process is for a charter. It's the extra process that sort of elevates this as a procedural tool. And so, yeah, basically, we pass and publish this ordinance, and then within 60 days, if somebody, they have to file a referendum petition, which is set forth in the statute, those requirements that are cited there. If that is filed, then this ordinance does not take effect until we actually have a referendum on the question. So, I mean, I suppose that is the other, not insignificant policy decision being made here by going the charter ordinance route, is that, referenda are not,
I mean, I
they take
really-
a bit of effort, and so passing this exposes us to having to prepare to put a referendum on the next, I suppose it would be next spring's ballot.
Right. I just saw that language and I immediately went. So I was like,
Right.
we don't have to do that, right? That's only if somebody requests it.
Well, right, yeah, that does not automatically happen, but.
Right. I guess I don't really have problems with the language in general. And Larry brought it up, and the one thought becomes like, what if people start doing it because it's just easier for them to phone in or if they live in Arizona for 6 months out of the year. I mean, I don't know that. I mean, but that's part of, then.
Like anything, if you adopt something and it turns out to
Right.
to
You get
not
the
be
people
working
that-
for you,
You change it,
but-
yeah.
or change it, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Too. Yeah, I mean, it's simple language. I don't think it
Yeah.
leaves a lot to really be desired as far as changes. So I guess we could vote on it. And so, and this is the process with this then, is if it passes through our council, it goes back to the, if it passes this committee, it goes back to the council.
Yeah, if
For-
there isn't any
Yes.
other committee that would consider this.
Okay. And there's, okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm fine with it, Katie, if you're fine with it.
Yeah, I would like to move that we approve this charter ordinance and that we recommend it to the common council.
All right, I will second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And none opposed, so motion passes. Second ordinance item is a review of an ordinance to update the planning and zoning fees. And Matt had sent a separate email about that.
Yeah, I apologize. I looked at it, I thought it was gonna be a little easier to turn that memo into an ordinance, but there was some things I had to reconcile, and so.
Oh, here it is, okay.
But yeah, to put it into.
So am I correct in understanding our current zoning ordinance is being reviewed right now?
Yes, it is, but it's. Well, I don't know if the fee structure, I mean, there's certain aspects of the fee schedule, like the references back to the ordinances will ultimately have to be changed, but first of all, I think it's gonna take a few months yet before this zoning code rewrite is done. I
Okay,
myself have just begun to dig into it, and it's
Yeah.
a lot.
that's what I heard. That's what I
It's a
heard.
lot.
Okay, okay.
And Daphne is here. She's the one who had referred it to me, so I don't know if she might answer some questions as well, if you're interested.
Yeah, I'm here to answer any questions. Yeah, Matt's right. Our zoning code is under review right now, and honestly, I don't think any of the fees will change too much. You know, in the review process, it's just, you know, the structure of the code itself is going to be changing.
Yeah.
Okay, so it'll just be the references back, and you don't see the changing in the zoning ordinance isn't going to be adding enough substantial work flow for staff that we're going to be seeing that much more staff time. I mean, or is that something we don't find out until it goes into place, and then a year later,
Right.
oh my
Well-
God, I'm spending hours and hours. We need more.
Well, I
So-
mean, I recommend, you know, I've always, part of the whole goal for having, I mean, for those, we didn't used to have this fee schedule like this. Our fees for all our stuff used to be scattered throughout the ordinances. And so the main purpose for doing this cross-reference and trying to put all of this into a fee schedule is that so staff could ideally annually or at least regularly have, boom, here is everything here, and everyone can easily look and say, "Ooh, yeah, we ought to," and just to make the review process easier such that we would actually update the fees on a more regular basis. Because, you know, before we did this, I mean, I still think we could be reviewing it a little more regularly, but before we did this, we had fees that were just grossly out of whack compared to the cost that went into reviewing things. And, you know, we definitely want to make sure we're not going way above and beyond actual costs, but we, by the same token, want to be sure we are not way below. And that's usually, in my experience, where we find ourselves if we don't review them. So I would recommend we review these fees probably after a year or two, regardless of whether we adopt a new zoning code.
Okay. When was the last time they were reviewed?
I don't, I'd have to go back. I think we've changed a few, but I don't, it's been quite some time since I think we've done anything as comprehensive as this with our zoning and planning fees. So I definitely think this is probably at best overdue.
Yeah, not in the last 3 years I've been here, so.
Right. So Matt, are we simply saying this looks like a good format? This looks like, are we discussing the actual fees?
Well, yeah, that's oftentimes a bit of a subject of debate, because basically every ordinance more or less goes to L&O. You know, I don't think it's, if you have any real substantive concerns, that it's necessarily out of place for L&O to make those. You know, but I think typically where we have ordinances where there's another committee that has maybe more expertise on
Mhm.
substance, I think there's typically been some degree of deference to that substantive aspect, and in which case, you know, maybe L&O review becomes a bit more of a formality. Yes, it's a long way of saying that, you know, don't pull any punches, but I'd say just typically be cognizant of where the expertise lies, you know,
Agreed, yeah,
to know how far you should go in. But
Sure.
there's nothing in our ordinances that says you are limited to reviewing this on any particular basis.
So do we need to refer it to a different committee for any, I mean, I feel comfortable with the recommendations staff has made. I feel like they're the ones that would know.
exactly.
Yeah, and I definitely don't think the form of the part that I drafted is something that would need to go back to plan commission or anything. And so
Right.
the substance has already been recommended by plan commission. So yeah, unless you're inclined to sort of second guess those things, yeah, this really just comes down to, does the ordinance look good, and maybe more of a formality, but
So we're sending it to council. We're not sending it on to anybody else.
right, that would be my
Okay.
expectation. Just a
Um,
motion to recommend approval to the council.
Yeah, that's my motion. I would recommend approval to the council.
I'll second that.
All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Oops.
All right, motion passes. Excellent. Let me get back to the agenda. Okay, on to miscellaneous. We are number 1 under miscellaneous. A review of a request to extend the shelter reservation time at Lakeview Park until 1 a.m. on New Year's Eve.
Sorry, I was muted there, but this was referred to us by Mark Wagner from Park and Rec Forestry Committee. So this had been brought up to them. Mark had contacted us at the police department and talked to other city staff. All were opposed to it. The ordinance currently says, I think it's 10 p.m. And I'm not seeing any allowance for variances on that. So PRFC said they didn't have the final or have the authority to make the final decision, which is why it's here on our agenda.
So am I hearing correctly? You're recommending denial of the request?
So yes, the police department's opinion when contacted by Mark Wagner was a no on that, because it kind of opens up these exceptions. And I guess in my eyes, just from the L&O end of things, if that's something that the city wants to do, we're fine with that, but there should probably be a formal way codified in ordinance, in my opinion, to do that. So Parks was against it, the police department didn't like it, and then PRFC didn't like it, but they didn't think they had the authority to make that decision, so it's referred here.
Did I miss something in the packet that had like a specific request, or whose request is this?
Well, so it's a request from somebody who reserved, I suppose I should have mentioned that. It was a request from somebody who reserved the Lakeview Park Shelter on New Year's Eve to celebrate, New
Up
Year's.
to 150 people.
Yeah, so then there's no formal process for that request, so they just contacted Parks and asked for it, and that kind of started the whole, putting the wheels in motion here.
Okay,
Yeah, generally, I'm not super comfortable with just kind of ad hoc waivers of ordinances.
yeah,
I think technically that's not really the legal way to go, but I mean, at least my feeling is, given that nobody else in city government seems to be in favor of this, and at a minimum, it's something I think, if we want some kind of waiver or consideration process for something like this, it seems
Yeah.
like it ought to be something we ought to give some thought to, rather than just
yeah,
ad hoc.
So here's my thought on it, is that their we haven't seen, they didn't request a sound permit, they didn't request a special event permit. So nothing that we would review or any would have come under our committee. So basically they're asking for an extension of their shelter reservation, correct?
Well, yes, I think it ended up here because the ordinance says 10 o'clock it closes.
Right.
Okay.
Really, they're looking for they're looking
Looking
for
Exemption.
us to sort of bless a
Yeah.
waiver of the ordinance.
Okay.
I mean, and ultimately, I mean, certainly don't think that, to the extent we would ever consider just a temporary waiver, I think at best this committee would make a recommendation to the council. I mean, I don't see this committee as having the authority to waive common council adopted ordinances. But so the question, would given those recommendations from the other departments and bodies, I guess the question is, does this committee recommend to the common council that it waive this ordinance, even if that's legal?
yeah.
I have my doubts.
I will move that we deny this request to extend the shelter reservation time till 1 a.m. on New Year's Eve.
I will strongly second that.
All in favor of denying this request, say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion passes that it is as denied. Number 2 under miscellaneous, the discussion on the use of Stone Horse Green as it applies to the L&O committee.
I think where we last left this was in my court. Abby had forwarded me sort of her draft of the regulations and stuff, and I have reviewed it, but I haven't really had the time to kind of digest it, and certainly not have any substantive conversation with her. So I guess I just need a little bit more time to work with her on this, but
Okay,
definitely want to get it back to you well in advance of the spring, but
sure.
take a little bit of advantage of the winter months to spend some time thinking about this.
All right, so do you need a motion to defer?
I think that unless there's any other aspect of this the committee wants to discuss, but otherwise I think that's, what we're asking for.
Okay, I'll move that we defer this item to next month, or do you want it farther along?
I would put it on again for next month. I mean, I think I can get to it and have something.
Okay. All right, that's my motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion passes. On to item number 3 under miscellaneous, a discussion on future in-person versus Zoom meetings. And am I assuming that this is just this committee, or are we talking about all committees?
That was just this committee. I had some frustration. I was a little frustrated with getting up to speed on L&O stuff remotely. I am not a Zoom person. So I was just having some frustrations, and I wanted to discuss this as a committee just to see and get a better understanding. I'm sure staff would prefer things stay remote. I know that it's much easier for staff to be able to pick up wherever they're at. And I'm sure Matt prefers this over having to drive to Middleton and meeting in person. And we are a smaller committee. There's only 3 that necessitate the quorum. I mean, there's 2 of us that necessitate the quorum. So I guess a part of the reason that I wanted to discuss this was in relation to the charter ordinance and how it relates to the committees and their work. With the idea that when I asked for this to be put on the agenda, there was still some question about whether or not a charter ordinance would be drafted that would, or if they would be moving forward with a charter ordinance that would allow for Zoom meetings, or remote technology, I should say. So, I mean, I guess I just wanted to take a quick temperature of this committee specifically, to understand how everybody sees the work of this committee going. I've been on it for 6 months now, well, I guess longer than that, but, and just knowing how it's worked over Zoom versus in person, if there's any things that might work better, or if there's anything that anybody's concerned about if we were to continue with remote meetings. So, and like I said, I made a lot of assumptions on what staff would say. So if any of staff would prefer to meet in person, but I realize that I'm sort of in the minority where I prefer in-person meetings. Of course, on days like today, I'm like, well, I'm kind of glad that we don't have to go anywhere. So
I'll speak for myself. I mean, I think my personal preferences are entirely immaterial to the discussion. I will do whatever needs to be done to accommodate the committee. So,
And same for me. You guys can probably see that Travis is here as well. I was telling, he and I are going to be swapping roles. He's going to be taking over admin, and I'll be taking over operations in the spring. So he's just kind of peeking in here. So he can speak for himself. It does not matter to me. I'm in Middleton anyway for these meetings, so it's not an issue for me.
Travis, how do you feel about it?
I don't have a strong opinion either way. I'm also in Middleton usually. I think there's a lot of convenience with the remote, and I think, do you guys ever have guests that have to come here from a distance? And I don't know if there's a hybrid option for those folks, or if that would make them easier for them to do it remotely, but just something to consider.
Right. As long as I've been on L&O, we've never had guests, but just applicants. I think it is easy for applicants to Zoom in, to do the remote. For me, like Captain Jeremy and Travis, I'm in Middleton. I do like being able to have the remote option, because sometimes I work right up until the meeting is about to begin. And so that's nice not to have to organize everything and then get there in time. So I understand, Kendra, you've only known these in remote sessions. Honestly, I don't feel like there's anything missing as far as not being in person, but I'm happy to let the other folks who have attended here, like Jeremy and Matt, if there's something that you think is more beneficial for in person, I don't know.
I mean, I would say, of all the committees, given the lower number and how infrequently we necessarily need to interact with guests, speakers and stuff. I mean, certainly of all the committees, I think this one is the least impactful. The least difference between in person and the virtual meetings. Now, we don't have a lot of, one of our things sometimes we have to have any more significant hearings on license revocations or things like that. There certainly could be specific times where I think in person would work a lot better, but yeah, I think this works about as well for as compared to any other committee, and not, it's just the number and not having so many different people to be looking around at. Yeah, I don't see a big drop off, but again,
I wonder if it would be something to consider that if there are agenda items that seem more complex, more time consuming, more people who are going to have to be involved, like calling in or applying and appearing, perhaps those we call an in-person meeting. Is that something that's doable?
That would be something as chair that you can just request, correct?
mhm,
I think so.
yeah.
Just thinking like, what if something were to come up like I don't want to say chicken ordinance, but I'm going to say chicken ordinance. Like that, to me, that's the epitome of like, oh, what a hard thing to have to do over
Yeah, that
over
was,
technology.
yeah.
So I'm just thinking as far as if we do go forward with this charter ordinance and it passes at council, how do we see committees being able to make those decisions and recognize when things are better? Do we leave it up to the committees to, you know what I mean? Like, and
Right.
specifically for us, I think that's a great point. Like if you as chair can say, hey, this is going to be, in person, at least requiring the 3 council people to be there, the 3 members of the committee that are required to be there, that has to be in person. Or do we do the same for staff and the whole committee? Do you like?
Well, I think, the chair typically sets
just-
the conditions of the meeting and
Yeah.
location. So, that's how, I would imagine it will go forward. Once we adopt this charter ordinance, we may find maybe perhaps maybe in more ordinance guidance or policy from the council, if we decide that, that these things maybe need more formal guidance. Specifically for this committee, and again, it works really well for this committee because of the low numbers and just the way it works. I think that degree of flexibility is not going to be a big problem for this committee. Might it be for others? But the Plan Commission, is another example of a body that I would guess oftentimes works better in person. Have they been back to, I assume,
I believe so, yeah.
mostly
Yeah.
in-person meetings? Just the more interaction you have to have, the more you have to see different exhibits and
Mhm.
just the more in person, I think, tends to work better. But
Yeah, so I would assume that the chair can call it, and then until we have the hybrid technology in place, if a chair calls an in-person meeting, everybody's going to have to be in person, I believe.
yeah, you guys, because it'd be tough for somebody to appear virtually if we are having an in-person meeting. Now, you could still have a Zoom link open.
Mhm.
As long as people realize that was not a
A two-way.
not a
Well,
I don't know, maybe that just invites confusion. Maybe until we have
Might.
the hybrid technology, we really need to be all in or all out.
Yeah, yeah. I think, yeah. This is not a voting item, is it? We're just having a discussion on this?
no, and again, it's just discussion. And like I said, I just wanted to get the temperature on how this committee has functioned in the past and how we might need to be flexible in the future should a bigger event come up. Should we need to start asking the chair to require in person should some
Mhm.
major event come up.
Right.
Yeah, my biggest change, and I, as, I mean, certainly one nice thing about remote is having the technology I have, although I can largely have that same way. I mean, my whole computer system has changed such that even the laptop I bring, it's much easier for me to access my normal resources remotely than it used to be. I could bring a lap, but I'd have to log in 3 different ways, and so a lot of the functionality that I have currently, I could still have now if I'm in person. I wouldn't have 2 computer screens and all that, but so even that really wouldn't be that big of a difference. But that's probably, to me, has been one of the nicer things as we've gone remotely. But it's, again, maybe not as much a function of remote technology as just how my own technology has changed during this pandemic. So I was kind of thinking out loud. Sorry.
Yeah,
No, fair.
Katie, can I
Any-
just point out too that Laura is here,
Yeah.
and she attends the meetings too, and she did in person before we left, so I don't know if she has an opinion on.
Jeremy, thank you for that. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, Laura, that I failed to ask you directly. I'd love to get your input, if you don't mind, on what your preference is for this committee meeting.
Or she stepped away.
yeah,
Could have,
I
Which
did
is
hear,
probably-
right,
Maybe that's
which,
indicative of the
which-
fact that she likes the remote option.
Yeah.
right,
did-
she did have
it
some
was-
kiddos in the background
Yeah.
when she was talking earlier.
Well, I think we got our answer from her.
Thank you for that reminder, though. I
No problem.
appreciate that. All right, anything else on that item? On to number 4, miscellaneous, a discussion on the possibility of drafting an ordinance related to smoking near multifamily homes. I asked that this item be added to the agenda. I got a call from a constituent who owns a condo, and he is a military veteran who worked on the, what are those called? Those toxic pits, a burn pit. So he has lung issues, and he also had COVID. And other people who have condos in the building stand just outside the doors and smoke just outside the doors of the building. And he said, especially when it's cold, they don't want to go very far away from the building, and the smoke really bothers him. And he was wondering if there's a way that the city could come up with an ordinance. And Matt, you know all about this, so I'm going to let you take it over.
Yeah, so we are pretty hamstrung. Now, I mean, because we were talking about a condo, I think the answer is probably no, but so our main limitation here is that by statute, the only place we can regulate or prohibit outside smoking is if it is public property under the jurisdiction of the city. And so basically, if it's anywhere on private property and it's outside, we have the 0 power. And that sounds to me that that's likely the situation specifically here. Now, if you have multifamily, I mean, we do have multifamily buildings that are up along the sidewalk in places, I imagine. We could have, well, here's, I got to think about this limitation, because there's this limitation that says that people in charge of restaurants, taverns, private clubs, they're allowed to designate. Yeah, so maybe that doesn't apply here at all. I think we can probably, if we have any multifamily where the entrances are directly adjacent to sidewalks, we could probably have some rules on, you can't smoke on the sidewalk if you're by the entrance of any. And actually, I'm not entirely sure now that I say that, I'm not sure we don't have that already to some degree. Let me just see.
We have the 15-foot. That's on public spaces.
All right, that's. And we've got a definition of service line. Yeah, I hadn't thought about this angle until I was just talking about it, but maybe we don't have anything in there right now. But it doesn't necessarily sound like that's really the issue either.
Do you know, Katie, if they're standing on the sidewalk or doing it, or are they still with on the?
I do not know. I do not know. This gentleman sent me an article from a website from Ann Arbor, Michigan. He said, I realize the laws in Michigan might be different from Wisconsin, but it's the Center for Social Gerontology. And the title of the article is Secondhand Smoke in Apartment Buildings and Condominiums. And I'd love to send it to Matt and Kendra and just see if there's anything in here that looks like it could help. I'm happy to just start this discussion tonight. And if there is nothing we can do, there's nothing we can do. The gentleman he seems really open to working with, the other homeowners, and they've sort of agreed to step a little bit away from the building, but if you don't mind, do you mind me sending this to you?
No, I'll
Okay.
tell you, yeah, but I think we just need to be clear that really, I mean, where we can regulate has to be public property. And so the only way we're going to be able to affect smoke as it applies to anyone in a multifamily or any residential, or frankly, any private property, is out in, that's being smoked outdoors, is if the person smoking is standing on city property. And so, I don't know how many places we have where that going to be a real benefit.
I mean, I realized I was, again, I'm upset because I actually did a little bit of research, and of course, when my computer rebooted it closed all my tabs. But it it doesn't surprise me that the condo association doesn't have this, but I'm wondering if we can encourage. I recognize that the city of Middleton actually says somewhere in an ordinance or somewhere I was reading that we specifically say that we recognize that smoking is not something that we would want anywhere on our public property. But I'm wondering if it's something that we can encourage multifamily units that are in the city currently, and any that are currently proposed, to include a designated space that's so many space, and include that as part of our building code or zoning code or whatever they do when they are looking to establish these buildings, that we say, look, you need to establish an area that becomes a smoking area that's far enough away from any habited units that allows blah, blah, blah.
Hey, can I ask Abby? Abby, are you on the call?
Yes, I'm here. I'm just listening in.
Hi, I'm just wondering if there's ever a discussion like that when you're planning a multifamily home. Is there ever talk of a building owner saying this is where people have to go to smoke cigarettes?
I don't recall it ever coming up in the course of our discussion with a developer or through the Plan Commission's review. The only current conversation that I've had that's sort of similar to this is we have an apartment building in town that has a public easement across it for a trail. And the apartment owners wish to prohibit people smoking on that trail system because it's on their property, but it's through a public easement. So that's something that I was just talking with our assistant public lands director about and trying to dig up some easement language to see if there was anything in there. But right now, there is no prohibition against smoking in public parks or conservancy land. I think Matt, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that the only park type space where there's a prohibition on smoking outdoors is at the Stonehorse Green. So I don't think that there would be pushback to having a designated area. It seems like it makes sense not only for convenience of, making sure that the smoking isn't interfering with the other residents' enjoyment of where they live, and it also would potentially consolidate the mess of cigarette butts into one area of the facility, but I don't recall it ever coming up, and I haven't heard of any facilities that have that.
Thank you, Abby. And Matt, I assume that that's something that's hard to enforce on
Yeah, I
someone's
mean,
private
s-
property.
Certainly, any private property owner could set up these rules and do that. And so there, I mean, there's certainly nothing wrong with us educating and encouraging, but yeah, at the end of the day, we can't make them do
Yeah.
it.
Okay. Fair. Okay. All right. Anything else on this item? Then I think we'll move on to the reports. A report on the results of recent underage alcohol compliance checks.
Yeah, so these were done on the dates you can see in the packet there, October 24th and November 7th. Just a little backstory on how this all goes down. So we get a volunteer, usually somebody from the police science program at MATC, who is underage, and they're volunteers for us. So if you're not aware, anybody who's under 21 has a driver's license that is printed vertically, whereas all of ours are printed horizontally. It says under 21 until, and we make sure that this person going in doesn't have a fake ID or anything like that on them before they go in. Our community officer is the one who coordinates that, got a volunteer, and these are the locations that they were able to check. Unfortunately, our volunteer then became too busy. We'd intended on going to a lot more, but it's also finals time, so I guess I can respect that. So this is as far as we're going to be able to get this year. Hope to do it again next year. Also, a little bit rewinding, before we even go out, we send a letter to all licensed establishments saying we are coming, we're going to be doing this underage operation. So they're all aware of it. So as you can see, the majority passed. That's a good thing. But we did have 5 businesses that did not pass. So all 5 of those listed were cited for the violation, and just here to let you guys know and see if you guys wanted to do anything with that information.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Didn't even know UW Provisions had alcohol until this meeting.
Yeah. Yeah, right. So it's a twofer, right? They got their
Yeah.
agent and
I was like, got a new agent and
a citation.
a
And
citation.
a ticket.
And
Is
just, oh, go
And a
ahead.
citation, does that mean a ticket? Are they fined as well?
Yeah, so there's a citation, a ticket, and then a fine associated with that for
Yeah.
sales to an underage person. Yep. And the law was changed a number of years ago, but we used to, like, if we'd have habitual problems, we'd issue citations to the business. That is no longer allowed. That law was changed, so only the person who sold
Right.
is capable of being cited.
We have in the past asked the agents for these businesses that have failed to come in and explain to the committee how this happened and what they have done to.
Yeah, they educating staff on checking IDs and all
Yeah,
that.
well, and I mean, to me, it's mostly been just the, kind of an embarrassment moment to explain, listen, we've basically waved the flag and let you know we were coming. And I mean, this should be like falling off a log, and yet you still failed. How did that happen, and what are you doing? You know,
Yeah,
and I mean, I think that has worked, because the first few times we did this list was did not look as good as it does now. It was, I don't remember the first time we did this. I just about fell off my chair. How many places just failed the easiest test you could possibly be given? So I mean, I do think that you know, a little bit of public shaming has made a difference.
Well,
it'd be interesting to see, actually, I mean, I should have asked this before the meeting, but was this done in 21?
Travis,
Because
you
of
can-
COVID?
I don't know if it was done in 21, and I think the last time we did it, and Travis, if you're, correct me if I'm wrong, I think what we did was license checks to see, we were having difficulty getting a volunteer, so we'd go ensure that they had a licensed operator on site and that they had their license. Is that accurate, Travis?
I think you're right on that. I think it's been before COVID since we've actually sent people in.
Probably,
Sure.
'cause most during COVID, I think at least during the falls, everyone had to have masks.
Yeah. True.
Well, I suppose you take them off, but
It'd be interesting to see, I mean, recognizing, I mean, I don't know. It'd be interesting to see if any of them are repeat offenders.
Yeah, and
I would see the point of bringing them in and asking them what's going on. But
I don't know that, I'd have to look into it. If they're repeat violators, it would be a handful of years ago, like Travis had said, it was
Yeah.
pre-2020, pre-COVID, since we sent somebody in.
yeah, I don't see any of these names sticking. Yeah,
No,
I
and
don't
Good
see these
Spirits
names
is a
sticking
new
out to me, so I
business.
don't think they're repeats. But that's kind of the.
so maybe that's our new baseline. And
Well,
we do it again
Probably,
soon,
but yeah,
and then bring people in if they've repeated.
I don't know how soon we'd be able to do it. I would have guessed sometime in 23, but I don't know when it would be. It's contingent upon a lot of things, availability of our community officer, finding a volunteer, because unfortunately none of us are under 21 anymore. So just it, and then all of the logistics of getting those letters sent out and everything. So
yeah,
I just don't
Yeah.
know when that would be. I can't commit to that.
yeah, no, that makes sense. I appreciate this information. It's and the undertaking that it was to put together. So
So Kendra, what's your thought about, do you think we should have these folks come in?
I mean, I'm not bothered either way. If you would like to invite them in, I would. It's fine, but I again, like if there was a repeat offender, I don't know. How big of a problem is underage alcohol sales in the city of Middleton? Like, is this something that,
I guess we don't know what we don't know.
right?
but
that's
it's
the thing.
suggests to me. I mean, the reason why I think we've done this in the past, and the reason, you know, why, you know, I think it's more. It's not just picking on these people. It's just because this. I mean, this should be a test that you don't even come close to failing. I mean, you know, I mean, we had done it before they changed it to the vertical, and of course you had people, and I just did the math wrong in my head. But now you've got ID checkers, you got everything. But I mean, you've got the license, it just is entirely different shape and form.
Yeah,
So I mean, I
that-
don't think you're being mean to these people by coming in and demanding an explanation for how is it that you have an employee that can't even get the most basic thing right with regard to this. And now that you know that this has happened, what have you done?
Mhm.
I mean, people began to know that, hey, they're going to be asked to actually come in and articulate what they have done. I mean, this is an embarrassing failure. Even if it is just once, the police department makes this so easy to pass. That's what the level of concern is, that well, you haven't even passed this. I can only imagine how many people that actually put some effort into fooling you.
Yeah.
But
Well,
Yeah.
I hear a strong recommendation from that.
Yeah.
I'm
I
okay
can't
with
remember what
either
business.
way.
it was. There was one that actually our volunteer went in and said, and I think he was 19. The volunteer went in and the guy said, "Hey, are you 18?" He said, "No, I'm 19." He's like, "Oh, okay," and then served him. So I mean,
Oh,
like we said, none of these are. We're not trying to trick him. He's provided his ID. Again, it's completely up to you guys. I just want to make sure that you guys understand. We're certainly not trying to trick anybody here.
Yeah. No, I just think like some of the, you don't card somebody,
Mhm.
you know, at the Quick Trip because you're busy doing something else and you
Yep.
just forgot and you're like, oh, I just forgot to card that person. So, I mean,
And
this happened. I mean, the fact that, you know, when you're sitting down to a meal and you're sitting there for a longer period of time, that's a little different. But if it's just one stop shop kind of stuff.
Yeah, and that's usually what this is. We're not having somebody sit down even at these restaurants for lunch. They're just going to the bar.
Bar, okay.
And I can get you
Yeah.
guys details on those. I guess that would be outside. I guess it doesn't really help at this point, right, Matt, for the decision, because that would be outside of the meeting then.
to go over,
I was just gonna say the details of what went down for each of these.
well, I mean, I think if you're gonna bring them in, we have typically had the details then, so then you listen to their excuse.
Yeah.
Then you get a little bit of the details, and, you know, because sometimes, you know, it has happened where, you know, well, at least back before the license became so easy to read, there was at least some plausible excuse. Somebody really did just forget, and now we've doubled our, you know, had them go back to this education or whatnot. But I mean, a lot of these, we have had people come in and they say, well, you know, what we did, we fired them.
Yeah.
And that sort of became the default standard. And that is, and sort of became what we expected to hear, except in rare circumstances. And I really do believe that is one of the reasons why our compliance, you know, got so much better. I mean, one night we had like 12 people, I remember, coming in and having to explain how they could have something like this happen. And so I think putting a little fear of God into them when the offense is so egregious is not a bad idea. And I would expect for most of these businesses, you know, one message is all they'll need to hear. Now, of course, you know, it's doing a little more challenging employment environment for these employers and so forth. So, you know, maybe firing the person is not the default, as much the default as it once was, but I think some explanation and some message that we expect some explanation and actual addressing of this, not just, well, you know, before this list goes back to being the way it once was. But
If it would
So-
help. Go ahead.
yeah, no, please.
I was just gonna say, if it help, I can look up these case numbers and get you the details now if that would
Well,
help.
what I'm wondering is if in the past, if this is done, do they all come in on one night? Do you invite them on one evening and we go one after the other? Or do we have,
yeah, no, we've even, I think one year we might have done this in a couple meetings because the number was so big, but yeah, I mean, in the past, we've typically had each of the owners just come in and we just kind of take them one by one and okay, you know, we have a little summary of, okay, this is what happened in this incident, and then let them say, okay, well, this happened, you know, how did this happen and what have you done to address it? And we listen to them and either are satisfied, maybe suggest some other things, and but the takeaway is that, hey, this is not something we just look the other way at, and we expect a tighter ship.
Oh, I lost my question. How soon do we do this? I would assume this is our example of an in-person meeting. We want everybody in, and how do we just say, we expect you to come to the January L&O meeting?
I would,
Or-
I don't know that it would necessarily have to be. I mean, you're just looking at the licensing agent appearing,
Yeah.
correct?
That's true. I think right, it's not like a evidentiary hearing, so where there's a lot of stuff going on. I do sort of feel like the real in-person has a little bit more of an impact, but is it crucial? Not necessarily. I mean,
Okay,
I think I feel a little bit more strongly that some accounting be forced of them than I am that it be in person.
okay.
But yeah, I mean, I do think that there's an element of being there physically with somebody that does sort of increase the gravity of it. But again, I don't think that's the critical portion of this.
And I don't necessarily think we can assume that everyone would have the ability to join remotely anyway.
So what are you saying? You're in favor of an in-person meeting?
I would be in favor of either. I mean,
Okay,
if that's what you desire, I think in person makes sense. You might have an easier time. People might have to shuffle to get things remotely set up. And in that case, I would maybe wait until you don't have to do it in January. Well, I don't know how fresh you want these. I guess it was November and October. So 1st of November. So I guess January would be fine. I think either way, whatever your preference would be, Katie, I think it would be okay.
I think
But
our
I'm-
preference is the same.
But
I think Matt.
I'm just wondering, I just want to be mindful that, like, compadres may not have, I mean, I don't want to make assumptions about anything, but good spirits too. Some of these smaller businesses, the agent for the Quick Trip may not have an office that allows them to do remote. These are businesses that don't do Zoom meetings, so their ability to appear remotely might be, I mean, I guess anyone with a cell phone could probably do it, but I don't know. Just trying to be mindful of where everybody's at.
Yeah, sure.
But also I don't want to make them feel like they're coming to a hearing but maybe that is the feeling that we want to give. I don't know.
No, that's the feeling. We want them to be, if they go away and then feel a little more relaxed afterwards. But yeah, this is a sort of a.
We want it to be kind of a
send
big
message.
deal.
Right.
Yeah.
It's to instill that message before things, things slide. Like I said.
Well, then it sounds like we should do it in person. And I guess this is a discussion item. Is there a vote needed to tell Jeremy to send out letters, or how do we want to do this?
I don't remember if we've necessarily taken a vote. No, I mean, I think you can just have a consensus to let them know to send out letters and have people come back in. I don't know that formal vote is necessary.
All right, is it okay with you, Kendra?
Yeah, I mean, if that's the way if that's the normal way that these things happen, sure.
It'll be my first as well.
Yeah.
So just to be clear, I'll send out the letters, but is this in person, or I want to let them know right away? In person, or is it remote?
Kendra.
You're the chair. You get to make that call.
Am I-
Let's do it in person.
Okay. My next question, I probably should have been my first question is, I'm assuming that room is available, conference room C, that we always used to be in, but I guess I don't.
Is there like a scheduling calendar for that?
I'm sure there is. I don't
I
think
have no idea.
I have access to, but I can look into that too.
Okay. Because we could also do it, I mean, we could do it in,
Yeah,
We were
we
really
can
want-
do it later.
and we could do it in the council chambers if we were, I mean, there's rooms available we could find, I'm sure, if the room is a problem.
Yeah,
I'll look into it, but I'll make it an in-person. I'm assuming it, in the past, it had always been a standing reservation for LNO pre-COVID, because
Mhm.
we're always there. I think plan commission meeting in person, because that was always after us at 7.
They are. Mhm.
They've been using the council chambers last night.
Mhm.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
sometimes, and we're getting pretty close to the 7 o'clock hour, so
Mhm.
sometimes it overlaps. So
Yeah,
I'll see if conference room C, although that, if we're bringing 5 people in addition, that's kind of small, so I don't know.
Yeah, we've done it.
we can have them sit on the outside
Okay,
edge.
right.
Be a
Yeah,
very full room, very intimidating.
It could. I mean, we've had a lot of people in there.
When we did the exotic animal ordinance, we had all kinds of people in there with their sugar gliders in their pockets and.
What?
Oh, yeah. Next time we'll just have an agenda item. We'll just regale you in the old days of LNO.
Hey, you missed out on the chickens too.
Wow. Okay,
yeah.
sugar gliders in pockets. Okay, so Captain Jeremy, you're good on
I'm good.
whatever you need?
Yep.
Whenever it happens is fine with us.
All right.
And I think that's all on the agenda.
It is.
It is. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I will make a motion to adjourn.
I will second. All in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And we are adjourned. Thank you all very
Thanks,
much.
everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Captain Jeremy, I have a quick question for you that's not related to our agenda. And
All
we're done
right.
with our
Yep.
agenda, if that's okay. I have,
Right.